This message today, it's called Jesus Just Like Me. Jesus Just Like Me. And this stemmed from a conversation that I had with my daughter this week. And she's not here, so I can pick on her. But we had a conversation about people her age being able to relate to Jesus. Right? And my kids, and just like a lot of kids, they like these superhero movies. Right? How many have kids or grandkids or somebody related to you? They love the superhero movies, right? When we were kids, the superheroes were a little different. Today's superheroes is way different than what we grew up with. The superheroes we grew up with were, they never told a lie. They always did the right thing. They usually only had one weakness. Something like that. But over the years, we've noticed that the superheroes that the public likes in general has changed a lot. And it's reflective of the people that we are today. If you watch the superhero movies today, they're very flawed people. They're narcissistic. Sometimes they're not really good, they're not really bad. They're somewhere in between, but they do the right thing at the end. Right? The superhero has changed a whole lot. But I've noticed that the kids relate better to the superhero. They relate better to Marvel and Disney and DC and all these other things better than they can relate to Christ. And so I'm having this conversation with my daughter, and I asked her just point blank, why is that? Why is it that you can watch a Harry Potter movie and you can understand and relate to the characters more in those movies than you can relate to Jesus? Why is it that you can watch a Marvel movie and understand their characters and relate maybe to one or two or more characters in their movies, but you can't relate to Jesus? I said, what is it? And so she was honest with me back. And so I'm going to hand out, you guys didn't know you were getting a pop quiz today, but I'm going to do this. So if somebody could help me hand these out. Thank you. And so, one of the things that she talked about with me was the way that Jesus is portrayed. There's the Jesus of the Bible, and there's the Jesus that we see portrayed in people's lives. Would you guys agree that sometimes those aren't the same? That the Jesus of the Word is not the Jesus that they see in church, or that they see at their mission academies, right? Will we all agree that sometimes we don't portray Christ like we should? Right? Brother Jonah talked about being hard-headed. And so we have this issue sometimes that the Jesus of the Bible and the Jesus in our lives are very different Jesuses. We call it the multi-Jesus. Now, when everybody gets their paper, just take a look at the pictures. You got one side that's got pictures and one side that has words on it. I want to start with the pictures, because I think this is kind of a funny lesson. But you guys all have the papers? Can you guys look at the pictures? So I pulled up the first 5 pictures that came up when I did a search for Jesus. That's all I did, is I put Jesus in the search on the computer, and those are the first 5 that came up. Do you guys notice a pattern with those Jesuses? Who said it? They're all what? They're all white. They're all haole, right? And I've had people say this to me. They said this to me, people that don't come to church. They'll say, why is it you have a blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus? Wasn't he Jewish? Right? Yeah, tall, dark, and handsome. But the fact is that we make Jesus to look like us. Right? We take what we think Jesus should look like, and we typically want to make Him look like us. So if you look at some of the pictures, Jesus has feathered hair. He has that English nose. He has fair skin. Now, are those attributes of a typical Jewish man? No. No. Even if you go to our academy, and I'm not picking on our academy, but you go to our academy and you see pictures of Jesus there, and they're similar to those. Right? You rarely see a real picture of what Jesus probably looked like. Right? That's because we want Jesus to look like us. Now let me ask you something, guys. I mean, we study this all the time. Does the Bible say for us to make Jesus like us? Or are we supposed to be like Him? Be like Him. But does it really matter what He looks like physically? It can, to some people. Right? It can. Right? Because if I don't want to make up a word here, but if we have typically made Jesus white, right, with His features and His mannerisms and His character, then that automatically displaces Him from other cultures. Right? Now Jesus came as a Jew. He was raised as a Jew. He was born a Jew. He ate like a Jew. He worshiped like a Jew because that was His culture. But sometimes we take all those things out and we extrapolate only what we want. Right? And so we make Jesus like us. And just like the superheroes have changed. Remember, the superhero used to be the person we aspire to be. Now the superheroes are the people we actually are. You remember they used to do that with gods. Remember, the gods were angry at each other and they'd fight, and they were narcissistic, and they were vengeful, and they were all these other things, because instead of having gods that were divine, they had just pretty much humans that were made divine. Does that make sense? If you guys would flip the page over, there's some words on the back. And this is just kind of food for thought. I want you guys just to think about this. This is really for you. I'm going to read some of these words off, and I want you to raise your hand if you agree that this is a description of Jesus, or this is an attribute that you think belongs to Jesus. Firm. Who thinks Jesus is firm? Who thinks Jesus was hard-working? Let's see every hand on that one. Worked hard to secure our freedom. What about careless? I don't see any hands. Nobody thinks he's careless? What about harsh? No harsh? Loving? Everybody thinks Jesus was loving? What about kind? Jesus was kind? Is kind, right? Was He a teacher? They called Him rabbi, teacher, teacher. I've had some good teachers and some bad teachers. Makes a difference. What about taskmaster? You think so, Jonah?
He's a master.
A taskmaster. When I say taskmaster, the connotation is that he works you hard. He got the whip. That's what that means. He's a taskmaster, right? He's like a plantation owner, if you can think of that. Was He obedient? What about strong? Now, when I say strong, do we think strong in character? Do we think physically strong? I mean, He was a carpenter. We always forget that fact, that He was a carpenter. He was born and raised a carpenter. His dad was a carpenter. He worked with his hands. So He was not, if you look at those pictures of Jesus, and you see this very dainty, this very light skin, never got any sun Jesus, that's not the Jesus that we know. Right? He was raised a carpenter. He was probably out in the sun all day. He was working, hard. He probably had gnarled hands. He might have had more leather skin. We'll find out. What about oblivious? Anybody think Jesus is oblivious? What about tender? You see Jesus is tender? What about crazy? Did a lot of people think He was crazy? A lot of people still think He's crazy. What about dismissive? Did He come across as dismissive? What about resolved? Resolved. You know what resolved means? It means you don't change your mind. You stick with it till the end. What about gullible? Was Jesus gullible? He knew better, right? When somebody tried to tell Him a story, He knew better, right? What about thoughtful? Was Christ thoughtful in His responses? What about encouraging? Encouraging. Any of those who, like me, who are hard-headed, know the encouragement that Christ gives. Did Christ seem distracted?
No.
Is there anywhere in the Bible it seemed like he wasn't really paying attention? What about faithful? Say Jesus was faithful? What about respectful? Was he respectful with people that even disagree with him? What about micromanager? You don't see Jesus as a micromanager? You know, sometimes we portray Jesus as that micromanager. Got that checklist. Looking over your shoulder, watching you work. And you know he's making all bad marks, right? Not doing this, not doing this, should be doing this, and not doing that either. So I would say that we mostly agree on the list, right? Right? If you go down through those things and you would agree, you know, most of us would agree on the ones that we say are like Jesus and the ones that we don't think are anything like Jesus. But what does the Bible say about Jesus? Not what we think, not what we hope for, not what we believe, but what does the Bible actually say about Jesus? If you would turn with me to Matthew chapter 8. Matthew chapter 8. And I'm going to go through, these are just different scenarios that Jesus was in. And we're going to kind of talk about his attributes a little bit. Matthew chapter 8, starting with verse 1. Just say amen when you're there. Because, you know, there's a lot of times that we as people of the Word, we believe things that aren't necessarily biblical. Maybe because we hope for it, or maybe because we just don't see it, whatever. And we don't take God's Word for what it is. Because God describes in His Word who Christ was and what His attributes were, right? So Matthew chapter 8, starting with verse 1. This is one interaction. It says, when he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Then Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing. Be cleansed. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. The word that I thought when I read that is kind. He was kind. This man was desperate, and he came to Jesus, and he asked him, he said, if you're willing. He wanted to know if Jesus would heal him. And Jesus responded in kindness, and he says, I am willing. Be cleansed.
He showed loving kindness.
Exactly. He showed loving kindness. He took pity on somebody who was in a desperate situation that was an outcast, right, in his community, and he wasn't allowed in the temple, wasn't allowed to work, wasn't allowed to be around his family. And Jesus saw that and restored him to full health. He said, I am willing. If you would turn with me to Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22. This is the next interaction that Christ has. Starting with verse 31. I love the verse that says, I think it's at the end of one of the Gospels. And it said, if we wrote everything that Jesus did, the world couldn't hold the volumes. We only get a small glimpse. If they'd written everything, the Bible would be a whole lot bigger. This is only the little bit that God chose to show us, right? So Luke chapter 22, starting with verse 31. Are you guys there? It says, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed, Satan has asked for you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. Amen. But he said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. Then he said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny me 3 times that you know me. Now, the word that I thought when I read this interaction with Peter was encouraging. Jesus already knows Peter's character. Right? He knows what's going to happen. And this happens within a day of this. This is right before the events of Gethsemane. And so he knows already that Peter's going to fail. But he also knows, because he is Christ, that Peter's going to return. And I love this because he says effectively, Simon, you say you're going to be with me until death, that you'll go to prison with me, but I know better. I know your character. But once you've failed, once you've experienced that bitterness, and you come back to me, and then your character has been transformed, I need you to strengthen your brothers. In other words, I'm going to build my church on you, but until you go through this, you're not ready. And again, I look at the word encouraging. This is a Jesus that says you're going to fail and it's going to hurt. But after that, you're going to be my guy. You're going to be the guy that I need you to strengthen your brothers because it's going to be tough. And what did Peter do? What did Peter do with that opportunity after he had failed miserably, after he had wept bitterly? Was he resolved after that? Did he go to death for Christ? He absolutely did. Because Jesus encouraged him. Jesus loved him and said, I know your character now, but I also know your character 2 weeks from now. And you're going to be a different man. And that different man is the one that I've called to strengthen your brothers. Encouraging. If you would turn with me to Matthew 21. Matthew 21. It's another interaction. You know, sometimes we're not comfortable with some of these stories. We like to pick and choose kind of the ones we like and the ones we don't like. And this is one of those ones that sometimes we like to overlook. Matthew 21, starting with verse 12. Just say amen when you're there. Amen. It says that Jesus went into the temple of God and drove out all those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he said to them, it is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. Now just for a minute, I want you to imagine that we're having a service. And someone comes in and starts kicking over the tables, starts moving the pews, takes the guitar out of your hands, right? And calls you a bunch of liars and thieves. And then, when he's done with that, says, okay, now we can have church. And this is what happens. It continues. It says, then the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying out in the temple and saying, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were indignant, and said to him, do you hear what they are saying? And Jesus said to them, yes, have you never read? Out of the mouth of babes and nursing infants, you have perfected praise. So Jesus kicks out the thieves. They're doing business in God's house. They're robbing the people. They're robbing the poor. Remember, the doves were for people who didn't have an animal. They didn't have a sacrifice to bring, so they could come and they could purchase the doves, and then they could use those as sacrifices. God had provision for the poor, right? Because not everybody had the means to be able to bring the animal, much less an animal without defect. And so what were the people in the temple doing? Making profit. They were good at making money, right? They were like we Americans, you know, we like our profit, right? So we should be able to understand this story. You know, they got to make a little money. You know, you can't just sell it at cost. You know, you got a car to pay for, a house. You got to send your kids to school, to the academy. Not cheap, right? But the fact is that Jesus went in there and he saw them robbing the people, and he kicks them out. And sometimes we don't like this side of Jesus. We don't like the fact that he is angry. Angry and physically showing that he's angry. Again, imagine if I started kicking over things, it would be uncomfortable, right? It would be uncomfortable for everybody here. But the word that I thought during this interaction with the people in the temple was resolved. He was resolved. He was not going to allow them to treat the house of God like a market. He was not going to allow the people that were selling these doves to take advantage of the poor, when this was the whole intention of it was for what? It was for forgiveness. It was to point to Christ in the first place, was the whole purpose of the sanctuary, the whole purpose of the temple. And they had polluted it, and they had disgraced it and blasphemed it. And He let them know about it. And then when He was done letting them know about it, and He kicked them out and scolded them, then He had church. Then everybody showed up and He started healing people. He was resolved. And He did this publicly. This was not a private thing that He went off to the side and said, you know what, boys? I'm kicking you out. You can't have the table in here. He scolded them and did this publicly. He shamed them. Right? And why did He do it publicly? Because they were doing it publicly, the sin. And it had to be confronted publicly. If you would turn with me to Matthew 23. Matthew 23, starting with verse 13. Now, this whole chapter is similar, but I picked some verses out of this because Jesus did not mince His words. He did not hold back in this sermon He gave effectively, right? Matthew 23, starting with verse 13. It said, "But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Therefore you will receive greater condemnation. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you travel land and sea to win one proselyte. And when he is won, you make him twice the son of hell as yourselves." Man, that's harsh. That's harsh. That's like me getting up and pointing at you guys and saying, you guys are all hypocrites. Everything about this service is a sham. You bring people in here and you make them twice the sinner you are. Would you guys like to hear that? I wouldn't like to see it, so... But he actually, again, I take a small excerpt of this. He goes down the whole list. He calls them out on every sin, on every hypocrisy. I mean, he gives it to them. But the question, when I read this, the word that I came up with was rebuke. But do you believe this rebuke was done in love? Or do you believe it was done out of malice or spite? He did it in love. So He called them out on their sins. Not to make them feel bad per se. Not to kick them while they're down. But to point out their sins so they could find salvation. They could find forgiveness. But He rebuked them publicly. Now remind you, these are the leaders of the church at the time. These are the people that hold the highest positions. They're the most revered. They're the most respected. They're the most educated people. And He's effectively saying your whole life's a sham. This whole thing that you do, all these learning, these education that you go to, this PhD that you have, it's all worthless because you don't understand who God really is. Now some think that's harsh. But I see it as love. If you would turn with me to Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7. And this is the last example. And I love this example because it shows the provision of God, that God is not a God of singularity. He is a God on multiple layers. That He's doing things constantly in our lives and for us. He's not only trying to save me, but He's trying to save you as well. Amen. Luke chapter 7, starting with verse 36. It says, "Then one of the Pharisees asked Him to eat with him. And He went to the Pharisee's house and sat down to eat." Now I'm going to stop there because we like to pick on the Pharisees because He just gave it to them in chapter 21. But the fact is, where is He at now? Where He's been asked to go to a Pharisee's house. And does He say no? He goes. He goes to the Pharisee's house. If you remember, this is the thing that they really hated about Him, is that someone would invite Him to dinner and He'd go anywhere. Right? He didn't care who it was. He didn't care what they did, what they were doing. He'd go and eat with them.
Amen.
Remember he told Lazarus, I brought salvation to your house. And behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of fragrant oil, and stood at his feet behind him weeping. And she began to wash his feet with her hair, or with her tears, and wiped them with the hair of her head. And she kissed his feet, and anointed them with fragrant oil. Now when the Pharisee who invited him saw this, he spoke to himself, saying, This man, if he were a prophet, would know who and what manner this woman who is touching him, for she is a sinner. Now, I just picked this up actually reading this now. Do you remember someone else who questioned God's or Christ's validity? Remember in the desert when when Satan said to Jesus, if you are the Son of God? Remember that? He kept saying that, if you are the Son of God. And here this Pharisee is saying, if he were a prophet, he would know the kind of woman this was. He's questioning the very mission of Christ. And Jesus answered to him and said, Simon, I have something to say to you. So he said, Teacher, say it. There was a certain creditor who had 2 debtors. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Now just so you know, 500 denarii was a whole lot of money. Something you could never pay off. And when they had nothing in which to repay, he freely forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him more? Simon answered and said, I suppose the one which he forgave more. And he said to him, You have rightly judged. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, Do you see this woman? I entered your house, and you gave me no water for my feet. But she has washed my feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. You gave me no kiss, but this woman has not ceased to kiss my feet since the time I came in. You did not anoint my head with oil, but this woman has anointed my feet with fragrant oil. Therefore I say to you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. For she has loved much, but to whom little is forgiven, the same loves little. And he said to her, Your sins are forgiven. And those who sat at the table with him began to say to themselves, Who is this who even forgives sins? So Jesus is showing a lesson to 2 different people. The woman who was sinful was so broken that she was crying in his feet, literally crying tears all over his feet and washing his feet with her hair. She was so broken and wanted forgiveness so much. And Simon, a Pharisee, did not understand this. He did not understand the mercy of God, but he needed to see it. And this is an example of where Jesus didn't just tell him about it, Jesus showed him firsthand. So he's addressing the needs of the sinner who is the woman, but also addressing the deficiency in character of the Pharisee, Simon, who needs to understand what God's mercy is. Who needs to understand that it's great that you have religion, it's great that you talk about God, but to really understand God, you need to understand what forgiveness is. And this is something that Simon lacked. Amen. And the word that I thought when I read this interaction is merciful. Because he was not only merciful to the woman, he was also merciful to Simon. He let Simon see firsthand, this is the kingdom of God. This is what it means to be forgiven. And this is what it means to love God in return. That no matter what you've done, no matter where you go in life, that God can be in your life, right? Amen. Now we've read these interactions, and I'm going to ask the question, does Jesus seem approachable? Yes. He does, right? Amen. Does it seem like there's anybody or any situation that he runs from? Does he go out and find the people? All these interactions, he goes to them. You notice that? He goes to them. They're not walking 20, 30 miles to see him. He's going to them. So why is it, if he's so approachable, why is it so many find a hard time with him? Why is it our young people don't understand Jesus, don't get Jesus? What is it? And I've got some things I want to share. And the first thing is this. Why do they struggle to find Him? And it's because we make Christ unrelatable. We make Christ unrelatable. If you would turn with me to Matthew 19. Matthew 19, starting with verse 13. We have to realize, as a church, as His people, that when we go anywhere, we take Christ with us, good or bad. So if we claim to be Christians, and we claim to be of Christ, and we go somewhere and we're a liar, or we're a blasphemer, or we're a sinner, or we're unkind, that makes people see Jesus as those things. But also, if we go to places and they see kindness and gentleness, and they associate Jesus with that, then they see Jesus as kind and gentle. Amen. You understand that we are a reflection, good or bad. Amen. There are days that I know I come home and I think, if that's what they see in Jesus, then no wonder they don't want to come to church, because I have failed miserably. And there's other days that God gives you those opportunities that you show that kindness and you show that mercy, and they get a little glimpse of who Jesus is. Matthew 19:13 says, "Then little children were brought to Him, that He might put His hands on them and pray. But the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, 'Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for such is the kingdom of heaven.' And He laid His hands on them and departed from there." There are different ways to forbid people from coming to Jesus. In this case, the disciples rebuked the people who brought the children. "What are you doing? Leave him alone, he's busy. Can't you see he's got important things to do?" And of course they were indignant about it. And Jesus said, "Don't get in their way. Let them come to me." And He said, "For such is the kingdom of heaven." But the fact is that we make Christ unrelatable. We may not physically block people from coming in. We may not rebuke them when they come in. But we make Jesus so distant and so unrelatable that they don't want anything to do with Him. Now I want you to imagine just for a minute. Just picture this in your head. I didn't have a picture of this, but I want you to imagine Jesus walking in this service, and He has a nice suit on. His hair is combed back in a nice ponytail. He's got perfect white teeth. He's got a nice silver watch on, because we Adventists don't like gold, so he'll wear the $10,000 silver watch. Is that hard for you to imagine?
It's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. That's right. But the fact is that we make Jesus like that sometimes, right? Sometimes our Jesus drives a Cadillac or a BMW. I'll pick on my own car, right? We made Jesus things that He's not. We made Jesus dress a certain way. We made Jesus listen to certain kinds of music. We made Jesus only like certain kind of people. And then the people that come in and can't relate to that say, "Well, what's here for me? I can't relate to that Jesus." I call it the stuffy Jesus, right? The stuffy Jesus. We don't allow people to relate to Him in their own way. All of us came to Christ for different reasons, right? All of us had different circumstances. Some of us were raised in the church, and we found Christ over time. Some of us, like me, I was a knucklehead. I had to go out and find what happens when you sin. And mine was a little more traumatic, right? But we all relate to Jesus in a different way. And we block, especially young people, and old people too, it doesn't matter, and everybody in between. We block them because what happens is we portray Jesus as a certain way. We put Jesus in a box, or as my friend said, we put Him in a cage. Right? The fact is, we read about Jesus and He went everywhere. He engaged everybody. It didn't matter. You remember He went to Samaria. He talked to the Samaritans. He went to the Gadarenes, and that was completely... You remember He sailed across the ocean there and went to the Gadarenes. He went everywhere there was people that He could save. He went. It didn't matter who they were or what affiliation they were. It didn't matter what race they were. It didn't matter what sex they were. There was the woman at the well. There was the centurion. right? He loved everybody. And He met them where they were at. And this is the struggle that we have, is we take that, what we do is we take how we relate to Jesus and we impose it on other people. When I was a kid, I'm just going to be brutally honest, just so you guys know me already. When I was a kid, I was fortunate that my mom raised me the way she did as far as relating to Christ. But I would go to church and I would hear certain kinds of music, certain kinds of sermons. And I would literally think in my head, if I hear this one more time, I'm going to poke my eyeballs out. If I hear this one more time, I'm going to stick something in my ear to block my ear from hearing this. I don't relate to this sermon. I don't like the music they're playing. And because of that, I didn't want to go. My mom would have to drag me kicking and screaming. I mean, literally, I would beg my mom, don't take me. I don't want to hear that kind of music again. I don't get it. I don't relate to it. It's meaningless to me. It raises the hair on the back of my head. But the way that I was raised, there were certain people, and there's certain people now, that there were only, how can I say this? I'll just be brutally honest with it. We make certain things holy and unholy that God never specified. Right? He didn't. You know, we have a brother that likes to play the drums. Some people would say that if we have drums up here, we're in trouble. But the fact is, when I read the psalm, it says, praise Him with the clanging cymbals, praise Him with the lyre and the harp. Right? That's what the Bible says. Everything that has breath, let it praise the Lord. And I grew up in churches. They would walk out. If they saw a guitar, if they saw a bass guitar, they saw an acoustic guitar, I don't know what they would have done with the ukulele. They probably would have been a little confused. But they probably would have seen the strings on it and walked out. And so you have people in Hawaii that praise Jesus. I love when Uncle gets up here, and Charles and Bobby, and they get up here and they sing. And they praise Him with the instruments they grew up with. Right? And if I go somewhere else, you might see the banjo where I'm from. Somewhere else you might see the violin. Somewhere else you might see drums. You might see whatever it is that they're trying to praise the Lord with. But these young people are told constantly that the way that they relate to Jesus, the way that they praise Jesus isn't good enough. That you need to be more like the Kapunas. Right? The fact is that we all have different tastes. You know, Auntie Joby, you know that I like maybe 7 songs from the hymnal book. And that's just being honest. There's about 7 or 8 that I really, really like. The rest, you know. But I love the songs when Charles and Uncle get up here and they sing. I love those songs. Like they sing Amazing Grace with that different melody. I love that was beautiful. I hear Uncle playing the ukulele. He plays it so nice. I love it. He'll take a song I typically may not like, and now I like it. Right? But these are all tastes. These have nothing to do with holy and unholy. And these kids are told that what they're doing and how they relate to God is not good. Why would they keep coming? I remember... Huh?
They know it's good for them.
But they have to find joy, Auntie. If they don't find joy, if they don't find a way that they can praise the Lord in their own way, so we've effectively boxed them in and said, if you only do things this way, or else you're out. And I remember feeling that way growing up. And I was fortunate that I had a mom that she wasn't raised like that. That she taught me that there are things that you like and don't like. There are things at the potluck that I like and don't like. That doesn't mean one's holy and one's unholy. It just means I don't like one. Or I like one. Now I would tell you that poke is holy. That's the way I feel about it. As far as I'm concerned, everybody should have it. But my wife would disagree with that. That's not her taste, right? But we cannot make Christ unrelatable because our tastes are different than someone else's. Now look, friends, I'm not saying we should have a rock concert here. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we can't box God in. Because when we box God in, we box other people out. And there's a whole bunch of people that cannot come to church and they don't feel like they're welcome at church because they find no intimacy with it. You know what I mean? And I'll use this example. So, there's certain songs that we sing in church. There's certain songs, there's a way that songs were written 100 years ago. Right? The words that they use, the melodies they use, it's hard for me to relate to. So when I sing the song, it's not like me singing to God in praise, it's just me singing. Does that make sense to you? There's other songs that I can feel in my soul. Brother Charles, you sang one, and I forgot the name of it, but you sang one probably a couple months ago. You sang it 2 or 3 times. That when I hear it, I tear up. I feel it in I feel it deep in my soul. Like I feel like that's my song to the Lord. Does that make one thing good and one thing bad? No, it just means that one thing I can relate to. But if someone tells me that I can't listen to Charles play on the guitar because he's playing the guitar and says that's no good, right? That's going to keep me out. And there's so many people, so many kids, and I'm picking on music, but it's not just music. It's everything. Young people relate differently. You know, if you think about when you came to Christ, do you relate differently as you walk along with Him? I do. It was way different when I came out of sin. As you walk along with Him, He starts to show you more and more things. So my tastes have changed a little bit. I've gotten a little more quiet. I used to like the more loud music. Now I like the more quiet music. As I've gotten older, my kids have gotten older. But as we walk along with Him, I relate to Him a little differently. As He's shown me things, as I get to know Him more, as we walk together more, and we love each other more, we get closer, right? But some people have not had that experience yet. And that experience has been kept from them because, again, we put Jesus in a box. That's the first thing, is we make Christ unrelatable. The second part is we tend to make Jesus like us. I don't want Jesus like me. If Jesus is like me, we're in trouble.
Amen.
I don't need a knuckleheaded Jesus. I need a kind and loving and merciful Jesus. You know, I've been in churches and they taught that He's an angry and distant God. That He's up there somewhere. He doesn't really care on the day-to-day stuff. He doesn't care about the details. But don't make Him angry. Don't make Him angry. Or like I grew up, I was taught that He's an intimate God. That He cares if you lose your car keys. He cares if you need a job. But He doesn't care what you eat. See, there's a problem there. It's like I was taught that Jesus is intimate only to a point. But the fact is we serve a very intimate God. A God that designed our bodies. We talked in Sabbath school today about sexuality. God designed that for us. He's an intimate God. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It is something He designed in its proper context. Right? But the fact is that He's an intimate God all the way. He cares about what we put in our bodies. He cares about what we watch, what we see, what we say, all those things. And He cares about the car keys. And He cares about the job. We can't stop with the intimacy. But we make Him more like us. You know, there's things I'm good at, things I'm not good at. But the thing is, Jesus is good at everything. Some teach that He's a loving God until He gets angry. You know, kids, week in and week out, they hear how loving God is. But if you die a sinner, you're going to hell for eternity. If there was ever a doctrine that bothers me more than that, I can't think of it. I have preached on this. I don't get it. I grew up with it. I heard sermons on hellfire and damnation. I mean, oh man, they could describe hell and the worms and the fire. Right? I never understood that. And I think a lot of people will not be in the kingdom because that doctrine has been preached. That doctrine is an assassination on God's character. It's saying that God is not just. That God will punish infinitely His creations. For a finite amount of sin, they will get an infinite amount of pain. No human being would call that just. And yet we hear it preached. Week in and week out. Most Protestants believe it. Most Protestants teach it. But the fact is we make Jesus like us. Just like the superheroes. Our society now wants superheroes that are flawed, that have character defects. And that's how we make Jesus. We make Jesus a knucklehead. We make Jesus vengeful. We make Jesus distant. That's the reason I put those words in that list. Dismissive. You know, I can't count the times that my wife or my kids have come to me in desperation, needing some words of advice or encouragement, and I was too busy doing something on the computer. That's not our Jesus. All the examples in the Bible are Jesus that interacts with them, that loves them, that wants to hear from them, that is trying to get them to do better, to heal them. We tend to make Jesus like us. And the third thing is we tend to dismiss parts of Jesus that we are uncomfortable with. The fact is that Christ went to places where sinners were. This whole model of our church is broken. I'm just going to give it to you straight. Jesus' ministry is He walked to where they were at. If they were on the 4th pew or the 5th pew, He would come here and He would talk to them and try to reach them here. He wouldn't call them to the platform. And so what has happened is we have these buildings that we call churches, which are not churches. These are places that we have church. Without us, there is no church. If you take the people out of this building, this is just a building. It's bricks, it's stone, it's wood, it's beams. It means nothing. You could have a shindig in here, as we call it in Kentucky, right? You could turn this place into a bar, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just a building. We are the church. And so instead of going out to reach people where they're at, we expect people to show up here. Now, friends, I like coming here. But we come here because we fellowship, because we're already believers. We come here because we love one another. We want to hear about Jesus. This is part of being a church, as we gather together. But also part of being a church is taking it to where they're at. Right? Taking it to where people are at. And this makes us uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't want to go where the sinners are at because they're busy sinning. I don't want to see that. But the fact is, you don't think Jesus saw things? You don't think Jesus walked into some homes that there were some uncomfortable movies on? Maybe some conversations, maybe some alcohol. Maybe they had people of ill repute. Prostitutes, gamblers, right? This is one of the reasons the Pharisees hated His guts. He eats with sinners. But the fact is He went to bring salvation to them. This is the mission of the church, to go out, not to stay in. Sometimes I think that if a hurricane, God forbid, but if a hurricane came through and knocked all the buildings down, we might be better off. We would be forced to go out to the community. We would be forced to go into someone's home. We would be forced to go out because we'd have no place to stay in and shut the doors. But that was His ministry. Did you know that Christ did not rebuke those who were already repentant? You know, I love giving a good rebuke to my kids. Something about being a daddy and giving it to them that's satisfying. Right, Jonah? When you told them that, hey, if you do this, this is going to happen, and they do it anyways, oh man, I love that conversation. You see? You see what you did? You see what happened? Who was right? Who was right? Me. But the fact is that Jesus did not go after them when they were already repentant, when they were already broken. You remember what the psalmist says? It says, a broken and contrite heart you will not despise. In other words, Jesus, when she was laying at His feet, with tears all over His feet and washing, His feet with her hair, He did not say, you see what happened? I told you not to do this and you did it anyways. You see where it got you? What did He do? Your sins are forgiven. Right? He wasn't overly harsh. Sometimes that makes us uncomfortable because we like to remind people, right? We like to remind people of their sins. We like to remind people, hey brother, I've been praying for you. You shouldn't have been doing that. That's what happens. But in other cases, He publicly calls out people Publicly now. Again, if I came up here and started calling people out, can you imagine if I started calling out the North American Division of Adventists and all of I mean, that would not go over well. But yet Jesus did that. And the reason He did it publicly again is because they were sinning publicly. They were using the things of God publicly. Again, selling things in the temple, right? And He had to call them out on it. That makes us uncomfortable. When's the last time you saw a public rebuke of anybody? And I'm not talking about political stuff. I'm talking about within the church. You don't see it. Even when there's open sin, even when there's people doing things they're not supposed to be doing, even in God's house, we don't want to say anything. Oh, we don't want to offend. But the fact is, Jesus is offensive. Amen. Ellen White said, a righteous life disturbs the sinner's peace. You want to disturb a sinner's peace? Live righteously. That'll make him mad. So how do we make it more relatable? And I'll close with these. We can't forget our first love. We can't forget who Jesus is to us. Because this is important how we portray Jesus to other people. You know, it's a good thing sometimes my wife and I will look at old pictures. Or we'll look at old videos. And we'll have memories of when we met. Of the times that we had. Our wedding day. That thankfully to my friend Linda here was broadcast on the internet. So my family could see it. But we look back at those things and it reminds us of where we've come from. It reminds us of how we got there. It reminds us of the love that we had that changes, that gets deeper. But it also reminds us of the exciting times that we had when we first came together. And this is what we need to do sometimes with Jesus, is we have to remember where He's brought us from. We have to remember the love that we had for Him, the tenderness and mercy that He's shown in our lives. Because when we remember these things, it makes it easier for us to portray these things to others. We can't forget our first love. The other thing is we need to allow people room to grow. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody has the same taste. Not everybody has the same roads. You know, I see brothers and sisters that come into the church that have struggles with addictions, with alcohol. And it amazes me that we point out the most, you know, what's that brother doing wearing that? I'm like, that brother last week was in jail. And he's in church this week. Who cares what he's wearing? Right? That brother's dealing with addiction. Let God work on that, and then God can tell him what to wear. Let God fix his broken family or his broken mind or emotions first, and He can work on the other things. Amen. It's funny the list that we have that we think are important, and God just crumbles it up and throws it away and says, let me work on his heart first. Let me deal with those things. And sometimes the Lord reminds me, don't you have enough to deal with right now? Right? Amen. Do we need a list for you? And finally, we need to meet people where they're at. Young people, old people, wherever they're at, that's where we need to go. Sometimes it's going to put us in situations that we're not comfortable with. Sometimes we're going to have to go to places that maybe we normally wouldn't go to, but that's where they're at. They're not coming here. Right? So how else is the shepherd going to get the sheep? Can you imagine the shepherd just saying, hey, come here, whistling. Oh, he's not coming. Forget him. What happens? The shepherd goes out and looks for them. That means if they're on the side of the cliff, that means if they're down in the ditch, that means if he has to go find them in a cave, if he has to dig a hole, whatever it takes to bring his sheep home, he goes and looks for them. That's what we're called to do. Honestly, if people saw that kind of love for them, it would change the way that they respond to us. Right now, we just tell them, you come here because that's where we're at. And you got to do things like we do it, or else you're not welcome. Does that sound welcoming? Does that sound like the Jesus that we serve? We're going to do better, don't we? I'm going to finish with this. Hebrews 4:14 through 16. It says, seeing then that we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but it was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. We have an approachable God. We have an approachable Christ. There is no situation, no person, no sin that He'll walk away from. And we need to do the same. We need to be more like Him in that respect. And we need to engage our communities and our people, especially our young people, and let them know that there is a Jesus you can relate to. There is a Jesus that loves you and will come after you and come to where you're at with the needs that you have and love you the way you are. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank You for the blessings of Your Son. We want to thank You for fellowship. We want to thank You for the rebukes, the chastisements sometimes when we need to hear it. But I'd ask, Father, that You light a fire in our heart, that we are not content to just come here, that we go out and take church to people, that we try to reach people, whatever walks of life You've called us into, that You give us opportunities, that You manifest those opportunities to us so that we can show just a little glimpse of who You are. Help us to do the mission that You called us to do. In Your name we pray. Amen.